Ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to be honest. There is a financial motive with regards to content creation too now. And AltTech, I'm telling these people, AltTech is going to become far more lucrative. It would be a terrible idea to ignore it.
Well, I guess this is the inaugural, the initial BitChute series where we have just amazing discussion, debate. I don't even know what's going on, but it's going to be awesome. Styxhexenhammer, it is such a pleasure to speak with you.
It's great to be here with you, H.A.
I am a big fan of your work, and I know that you are very high on BitChute, and it's something that is just growing exponentially every day. And so this is an exclusive series on BitChute, and I'm glad everybody on BitChute is here. Please subscribe. Obviously, Styx has, like, I don't know how many subs do you have on BitChute?
I think it's pushing 30,500 now, actually. So that puts it above what I was on YouTube until at least mid to end of 2014.
Very cool. Very cool. My subscriber base is growing on BitChute. So definitely subscribe to Styx, subscribe to my channel as well. And Styx, I'm going to start off with this. And since it's BitChute, we can just talk about anything we want.
It's anarchy.
Yeah, we don't have the man suppressing us. How dangerous, and this is something that I've often pondered, and I can't talk about this on YouTube because, you know, I just can't talk about this anywhere because the thought police might get upset. But how dangerous do you think Democrats could get? I believe they're going to lose the House and the Senate. Let's say they lose the House and the Senate, or the Republicans keep the House and actually gain in the Senate. They'll be at their loudest, but also their weakest politically. They're already, flipping hats off, MAGA hats off people. And what do you think they'll do? We saw from the Kavanaugh debacle that it backfired on them. I call it Operation Estrogen Fury. It backfired. How far will they descend into madness, and how dangerous could it get for the president, for the American people?
Well, they're already lunatics for the most part. What I still think is going to happen, regardless of what happens in the midterms, either then or in 2020, I think that there will be a schism on the left where the corporate neoliberals sort of end up disowning the social justice warriors. They'll end up disenfranchised, third party / independent / apolitical. They'll dwindle in time, I think. I don't see them as a threat to the United States, but I would say in the short term, for some years to come, they'll be heavily socially alienated. There will be violence. We've already seen riots. We certainly see protests where there's pushing and shoving and occasional attacks. I don't expect it to be like Civil War levels, but it will be there, yeah. I think the bigger risk from the far left is that they'll try to empower the neoliberals to censor independent commentators, to use the power of the state or of corporations. I don't fear a bunch of people wearing pink hats, but if those people with pink hats are successful in getting a $1 billion communications firm to tamp down on other people's ideology, it could definitely adversely impact things for years or even decades to come.
Is it possible that they actually lose the power to impose their lunacy?
Well, the neocons are all on board with it. We see a handful of people in the Senate are willing to question Silicon Valley's censorship. A lot of them aren't, including most Republicans. Trump will bring it up. Ted Cruz, to his benefit, and I don't like him as a person necessarily. Yeah, I would support him over maybe his opponent at this point. Rand Paul talks about it, and Amash and a few others in the Senate and the House. But for the most part, it's like when Marco Rubio was confronted by Alex Jones there and pretended not to know him, which is a bald-faced lie. He knows who Alex Jones is. It's pertinent to the very questioning that they were doing that day. But not only pretends that, but openly mocks him and makes light of it and pretends not to know who one of the central figures of that day's very questioning by his committee was. I think it's very concerning, but I think we've got to understand that most of the Republicans, despite Trump's populists gaining power, most of the Republicans are still basically just Democrats with an R after their name. It's exactly the same thing. It's just that they're not as open about supporting the wedge issues as the Democrats.
What do you think happens to Russia after this?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's slowly fizzling out to the point of actually, I almost feel bad for them that they've spent so much political capital and it's led to absolutely nothing.
Yeah, can I ask the Democrats, when's the last time you heard Mueller mentioned by any mainstream outlet? It's been a while. There's a reason for that, and it's not just Brett Kavanaugh. It's because the Mueller investigation is now just a headhunt after anyone Trump's ever been loosely associated with to retroactively justify its own broad scope. The Russia thing, I think, comes back from time to time. You see it aimed now more at other things, like they've tried to aim it at Europe, like UKIP is controlled by Russia. Bolsonaro in Brazil is a Russian pawn. Russians in Mexican electioneering. Russians in Eastern Europe. It's very wide scope for Russia. But then, did you see that other article? I think it was a little under a week ago. Did you see where they were trying to blame The Last Jedi's poor ratings on Russia? The movie ratings for the Star Wars movie. It's like Russian power has really dwindled in the last 6 months. They used to mint U.S. presidents. They could overthrow any election. Now they have to shitpost about movies online.
It's just unbelievable. They don't know how to wield political power, Democratic Party, and it's actually Trump has there's like a Sun Tzu element to Trump where he doesn't actually even he's not even fighting them now at all. I mean, with Kavanaugh, he's just let them implode. I think that Trump consolidates political power. I think that with the intelligence community, they're all going to gravitate towards power. The media, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more positive articles on Trump.
Yeah.
What
That's
happens?
What Scott Adams is predicting. Yeah.
What happens to the media after they've spent all their credibility after midterms?
Well, they don't have any credibility already, but they'll continue to die off, the legacy media. I think their efforts to suppress their competitors online largely haven't even been successful. Like, look, the worst aspect of their censorious ways was aimed at InfoWars because it's a major, very successful competitor with its hands and everything. Is InfoWars offline? No, it's still there. Alex Jones is still there. He still gets mentioned. He's still basically a celebrity with a lot of fans. They failed. They managed to, what I think they're trying to do is more, they're throwing their weight around to try to intimidate the alt media than anything. As far as the midterms go, though, at this particular time, I would definitely agree with you on the Senate. The Republicans will probably gain a few extra seats there. I don't think that Cruz is actually in danger. I think he will win in Texas. It's possible, but it's remote. The chance is like maybe 1 in 100 that he loses. Rick Scott, I think, wins in Florida. Right now, for some reason, a lot of them have that race leaning blue. I don't agree with Nate Silver on that one. I think he's wrong. I think Rick Scott probably wins, especially after the Kavanaugh stuff. In the House, though, I would say because there are so many more races, and because the Republicans presumably at the very least will lose some support, I would actually tacitly disagree with you at this time and say there's a chance that the Republicans lose the House. But we have to wait to see where the polls go. I think after the Kavanaugh fall, it'll take a couple weeks for the generic ballot to keep up with it. It's possible that the Republicans get enough of a boost that the House is no longer capable of going to the Democrats.
I am expecting, as you know, the House to remain Republican, and when it does, let's say it does, I'm expecting, and then the Senate, to actually gain seats for Republicans. When it does, I'm expecting a biblical epic meltdown of just the most orgasmic meltdown you've ever seen in your life. I predict the left will go, before they blame Russia or North Korea or you or me or anyone else, they're going to set their sights at each other, blame each other. And I have in my mind, because I used to be hardcore on the left, I see what they do to each other. They spend about 80% of the day trying to ruin each other's lives. what kind of epic Hollywood / I'm with her / different faction meltdown do you see? Because I think that night and the day after, I mean, who knows how they spin it, but initially it'll be, it's your fault. It's your fault. What do you think happens that night?
Assuming. Well, even if the Republicans merely gain a couple extra seats in the Senate while losing the House narrowly, it wouldn't matter. There'd still be a meltdown, because what people point out is, hey, SCOTUS is the big thing on the menu before 2020. The ability to appropriate money via the House, it's like Trump is already in question as to whether he can do that anyway, because there are so many never-Trumpers within the House. That's a zero for Trump. It's a zero-sum game. He probably doesn't even care if the Democrats retake it. Even if it were just the Senate, you're looking at Ginsburg probably dying in the next few years, or at the very least becoming demented and retiring. If Trump wins 2020, he definitely replaces Ginsburg. That's assured. It's like 99.9% chance. I think what you'll see is the three factions of the Democrats will schism. I think the social justice warriors will depart the neoliberals. Well, it's the same thing. The neoliberals will blame the social justice left. They'll be like, if only you hadn't continued to harp on Kavanaugh, we would have taken the House. If only you hadn't rambled about impeaching him after we already lost it. Why can't you just let it go? And then the business Democrats off on the side are already being hemorrhaged from the party. Like they're already, they were the main Trump bloc in the Rust Belt were business Dems. They were Reagan Democrats.
Any hilarious Hollywood celebrity meltdown predictions?
Lena Dunham, definitely. Sarkeesian, the usual suspects. I can't wait to see what Michael Moore's reaction would be.
They're gonna blame him. I think they're gonna blame. Did you see Kathy Griffin and him got into it? It's kind of hilarious.
Yes,
Kathy Griffin. Yeah, she was like, "Well, what were you doing?" To help out.
The left in America has a nasty proclivity towards throwing the older wave of liberals under the bus every time the new wave of liberals gets opportunistic about failing. So yeah, I would expect that the younger upstart crowd will attack the Michael Moores, the Clintons. They'll drag the Clintons over the coals. They will put the Clintons under the bus before it's all said and done. Trust me.
Is there a possibility, or is this a ridiculous thought, that Democrats could endanger the life of the president or something like that?
No,
if they lose.
No credible threat beyond the normal possibility, the remote chance of an assassination attempt.
So let's say they're at their weakest point politically. How do they then, because there's talk about that they want to pack the court, which I did just some research on. They would need 2/3, 67 senators, 2/3 of the Senate. They would need 290 representatives, 2/3 of the House. Then they would need the majority of states for an amendment to add Supreme Court justices to pack the court, because they're insane and they think that they have political power to do so.
That won't happen, but it would be very funny if the social justice warriors attempted. Because that's 10-20% at this point of the Democratic Party. It's a rising group, even if they're a minority compared to the business Dems or the neolibs. It would be very, very funny to see them basically bully the mainline Democrats into a suicidal battle to do that. Yeah.
And it would be a suicidal battle because it's not feasible.
Yeah, it'd be so funny to watch. The funny thing is, the neoliberals are dishonest and scummy, but they understand political strategy. The social justice warriors, even if they're crazy, they mean well. They just don't understand how to do anything. So watching them constantly make the neoliberals fail over and over is the greatest thing in the world.
And what I never understood, and becoming a Trump supporter, it's for me, no one bothers me. No one tells me how to think, and I still have my kind of progressive or left views on certain things. No one gives a shit. No one really cares. On the left, it was always policing. People were always trying to police me. You can't say this, you can't do this, you can't think this, you're helping Trump. And why is it that the left always wants to police their own thought process, whereas generally conservatives are pretty much, unless you get really deep into the weeds, pretty much let you think what you want to think?
Yeah, I would disagree on the evangelocons. They tend to be more moralistic. It's just the authoritarian element of the Democratic Party or of liberaldom is larger at the moment because they had power for so long. Like Bush was essentially a neoliberal. For most intents and purposes, George W. Bush could have been a Democrat just as easily as a Republican if you just would have given up on the traditional marriage shtick, and that would have ended it. You have Clinton, you have Obama, you have a very long time these same groups of people have controlled things at the executive and often legislative level. So what's happened is that over time, because they've had power, it's corrupted them and made them authoritarian, which is why, like the Trumpites, some of these people are highly religious, but they're also libertarian about it, and they're like, well, they don't really care.
I think that one of the things that it helps either libertarians or conservatives is that America, there's still, like you said, there's still pockets of people who want to tell you what to do on the right, but generally, the thinking is kind of like your philosophy. If gay people want to get married, go ahead. They can suffer like everyone else. No, I'm joking. But if gay people want to get married, that's not a problem to conservatives. If you want to believe in any religion, go ahead. There's less of there are less wedge issues that are rooted in irrational thought than before. So and also the Democrats made a huge mistake, like they always do. They thought that all minorities would vote Democrat, whereas you're seeing Latinos, 30% voting for Trump. I think there are going to be more Latino, more black voters, more minorities voting for Trump. And then what happens to the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think if the economy keeps going along well, it's like when Maher comes out and says, well, I'm praying for a recession to stop Trump. Basically you have to, because he's a money president. Foreign policy, what major foreign policy mistakes has he made? I ask this of people on the left. Sometimes when I'm like sparring with them on a forum or something, I'm like, what, can you name any particular mistake he's made? Oh, well, he hasn't made enough progress on North Korea. What progress was made by any of the past presidents, regardless of their party? None. They made no progress. They made negative progress. So on that, he's won. He's definitely won on money. They do have to pray for a recession, or they have to pray that he strokes out and falls down the stairs like Hillary Clinton or something, I guess.
Do you foresee any? Because I believe that Democrats are media driven. Whatever quote unquote enthusiasm they had was driven by the media, because they really don't have any legislation they're pushing. They don't have a set value system. They just crave power,
there's no platform at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Do you foresee any major controversy before now in midterms that Democrats can try to spin?
No. If they have some secret piece of paper, some government report that they're hiding, or some scandal, or real or imagined, they're going to wait until the end of October probably to release it. But there's no way to know that for sure. And they'd have we've got secret footage of Donald Trump having brutal diarrhea after a McDonald's meeting or something. That's possible. I just don't think that it's particularly likely. The October surprise may have been Brett Kavanaugh actually getting confirmed, because for a while it looked like the Republicans were going to torpedo their own nominee.
So Mitch McConnell actually, and I was surprised with this, he actually conceded on Fox that there was a chance that it wouldn't have gone through. And I actually would have thought that he would have been more confident.
I think he was worried about Manchin possibly publicly stating that he would vote for and then voting against at the last minute based on some trumped up, pardon the pun, charge or something. Oh, I changed my mind because this one part of the report that a constituent showed me that I just didn't notice before. I'm sorry, guys. I actually worried slightly about that too. I was like, well, what if Manchin is just saying that, and in reality it's literally like the deepest ploy by the Democrats just at the last minute to defeat the nomination.
What would have happened to Trump and the Republican Party had Democrats been successful in stopping Kavanaugh?
They would have been wiped out in the midterms. Trump would have gotten the blame for it. The party would have thrown him under the bus, but it would have been McConnell's fault. And by the way, McConnell should not be the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. He needs to get kicked to the side. If the Republicans are smart, they'll unseat McConnell.
And what kind of long-term damage do you think that this cataclysmic event that Democrats created, what kind of long-term damage do you think it is for the Democratic Party?
Yeah. Well, what I'm seeing, this is weird. What I'm seeing is a situation where most of the damage that's being done is fundamentally an illusion, but it becomes real because the far left keeps getting let down by the neoliberals. Like the neoliberals keep trying to use them as political pawns and saying, well, we'll stop him, we'll hashtag resist, we'll impeach Trump, Mueller for the win. Each time they lose, the neoliberals themselves don't really care because they're just using it as a wedge issue. But I don't think they realize how many people on the far left actually are very, very pissed off at them right now. Like, I think they're angrier almost at the Democratic Party's sort of centrist core than they are at Trump. Because they expect Trump and the Republicans to like do things that'll piss them off because they're far left, but they don't expect the DNC to keep letting them down. It makes them look weak, which was the risk that the Republicans actually were taking. They risked, if they failed on Kavanaugh, they would have looked weak, and that would have been the death knell before the midterms. Now the Democrats do.
So they lost the 2016 election, but then they kind of saved face with Russia. But now that's fizzled out. And then they had this cataclysmic battle with Kavanaugh. They lost that. Now let's assuming they don't get the House and Republicans keep the House, and assuming that the Republicans keep the Senate, I foresee them to be at their lowest point politically in decades, if not centuries. What, like you said, that was a very astute observation. It's true because the DNC is just playing everybody on the left and everyone just goes along with it.
Yeah, poor Tom Perez, he doesn't have much to say right now, does he?
No, no, he doesn't. But like if you have no leverage, you're not in a position to make demands or make ultimatums. But see, they're still pretending that they have leverage. They can kind of do that because I guess it's, they still have that next battle. But if they lose that next battle, then what happens? Do they continue to say we're going to pack the courts, even though would be even a further impossibility? Do they continue to pretend to be powerful? Like what happens to them?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because they like to liken themselves to the Rebel Alliance. They do a little bit of LARPing with their social justice warrior friends. It's like, yeah, but the rebels won. And the rebels actually represented good people as opposed. You're more like, Darth Vader's mentally bereft cousin or something that can't even force. It's very, very funny to watch. It's also a little bit pathetic, but I think what I've predicted will happen in the wake of 2016 is social alienation keeps building on the impotent left. Regardless of whether they win in the midterms or not, it doesn't really matter. If they win, things might be worse for them. Because then the neoliberals that did so poorly in 2016 will still be governing the party. They'll be governed by Pelosi and Perez and Schumer and ineffectual morons like that. They'll feel no need to reform, and the alienation of the far left will continue. The Democrats winning in the midterms, they still won't be able to. They're still not going to impeach Trump. They're not going to be able to stop him from nominating Supreme Court justices because they're almost certain to at least not win in the Senate. And they'll be impotent to stop the things that the far left most fears, which is Trump is president and Trump replaces Ginsburg, I think, or some other justice or something. I think this leads to a schism, and the party will crash and burn for a cycle. Then it'll rise back up and it'll reform itself into a new form. Now, hopefully that form is worth voting for, and they'll go back to being the party of JFK instead of the party of Obama or something. That my hope is that the Democrats don't stop existing. I hope that they provide a viable alternative that isn't based solely on disliking people, like wedge issues and open borders and wars and shit like that.
When do you think, how many losses do you think? Because I mean, that would probably be after the 2020 loss to Trump, right?
Yeah, that would be a real big indicator. That would totally crash them. Or if they fail badly in the midterms now, or if some major defeat happens between those. Again, if Ginsburg gets replaced by another John Roberts, that's really, really going to put stress on the Democrats. And the neoliberals will have to explain to some 10 million voters why they can't stop him. Well, he's evil, he's Hitler, he's a fascist, he's horrible, because the neoliberals have told them that through the corporate media to try to drum up support, but now they can't actually follow through. They'll have 10 million or so people within their own party convinced they're being governed by Adolf Hitler.
Why is Hillary Clinton fundraising for Bernie Sanders candidates? She's fundraising for not only Bernie candidates, but Bob Menendez in New Jersey. Why do they keep going back to the tap, they keep going back to the trough of Clinton money?
Sometimes I think Hillary Clinton may have been paid off by the Republicans, because doing that it tarnishes the far left candidates, while at the same time stacking the Democratic Party with far left candidates that won't work with the DNC. I don't actually know what the operative strategy is.
Because, you know, the RNC raised like a record amount, even with, you know, this horrendous media coverage. They raised around 250 million. The DNC raised
the midterms they have.
From the 2016 election till today.
Oh.
And the DNC raised 116 million, but they have every single advantage. Plus they have debt, and it's just, you know, that whole thing's like, you know, about to collapse.
Part of that, though, well, yeah, but part of that isn't actually good, because some of that's corporate money that's going to rhino candidates like neocons, which again, they're basically the same as the corporate Democrats.
Yeah. Where do you see the fundraising for both parties? Well, especially the Democratic Party. I mean, if they're asking Clinton for money, I mean, if they don't have grassroots support after, like, they have late night talk shows and they have Hollywood, and I don't know, Taylor Swift yesterday came out and, you know, explained her thoughts on the Tennessee Senate race. Where do they get their support after they continue to lose? Because, I mean, you explained the fracture that continues to evolve.
Yeah.
What happens in terms of support for them financially?
Well, they may have, again, if they reform their party because they've collapsed enough, then that probably gets taken off the table. They'll figure something out. The problem is that they have to either alienate the grassroots, younger leftist voters that do all the volunteering, and they help organize the fundraisers and stuff, and they are voting at higher levels, I think, for the leftist causes of the world. Or they have to alienate their big donors, the corporations, because they don't play nicely together. I think that they'll end up losing out on donations for a while. But again, money's not the greatest indicator of the strength or goodness of a party. Trump was outraised and outspent handily by Hillary Clinton, especially with regards to business donations, less so with grassroots. But I think, wasn't it like 4-1 at the end? And initially it was even worse than that for him, and yet he still runs away with it.
I guess the last couple minutes, what happens to the never Trumpers? Especially, let's say Republicans, you know, win the House again and Senate. What happens to the never Trumpers?
I think they start to dry up a little bit more. Like, I think large numbers of the Trump-backed candidates have won in primaries recently over their more neoconservative foes. I think that they can continue to dwindle, but there will always be a few of them there, you know. What
would propel the never Trumpers if there's always success on, or more or less success on Trump's side?
I'm honestly not sure. I think that they were taken in some cases by the same propaganda as a lot of people in the general population. They actually believe that he is going to do something crazy at some point, be exposed as a fascist, a secret Nazi or something. And I think that they fear being associated with him. I think some of them are hedging their bets on being able to see, I was the one that resisted. I was the one person in that photograph not Sieg Heiling the Fuhrer. I think Murkowski and some of these others want to be in that club. I think they honestly believe that he'll fail.
And I guess the last question is, in terms of the future of BitChute, in terms of the future of this as a viable alternative to what we have now, what do you foresee regarding BitChute's growth, and how long do you think it'll take before, you know, everyone's talking about it?
It'll continue to grow, and the rest of AltTech too. The thing is, the more that the lamestream tries to censor things, the more AltTech will tend to grow. They've reached a point now where they've sort of shoved, like, not just BitChute, Gab and Steemit and Minds and other efforts too, gotten them out of the limelight enough where they're almost out of the line of fire for some elements of the left, I think, or of authoritarianism in general. That is, there are still attacks on them. There's still, you know, raiding parties and corporate hit pieces by the corporate media, but it's beginning to dry up. I think the outrage has already been exhausted. Like the authoritarian left's outrage was sated in the wake of InfoWars being mass depersoned. They're still there. Fundamentally, they were at a loss to stop.
They're on BitChute, right?
Yeah, they're still on BitChute and elsewhere, and no concerted effort would be successful at removing them. So really what you've got is a situation where the old Silicon Valley firms have just seen some of the very talented people on their platforms pushed to their competitors. AltTech itself, though, has been skyrocketing. Gab just raised over 600,000 in a few weeks. Minds is now on the Ethereum blockchain. BitChute's rolling out new features too. Hundreds of thousands of people using it every day.
I think that when content creators get the same level of financial incentive from BitChute, or even close to what exists now, I think that the sky is the limit. I mean,
what I would say is I'm just glad to be on the early wave of people using these sites.
Absolutely.
People who wait. I've warned people, if you're a content creator and you're waiting, that's a very, very bad idea, because it would be like someone saying, oh, someone with a podcast circa 2009 or something, not going onto YouTube or not taking advantage of early wave Twitter to spread their work. They could be missing out on enormous amounts of money and audience potentially, just from a financial perspective.
I agree. Well, Styx, thank you so very much, man. It's been, as always, a pleasure speaking with you.